All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Uh, my name is Eric, and this talk is called Listening Like a Dungeon Master, Leveraging RPG Skills for Stakeholder Magic. Really, it's all about like just the commonalities between sort of running a tabletop RPG game and trying to either run like a stakeholder group, facilitate different types of meetings, that kind of thing. All right, so I've been making websites in some way for over 20 years, and I've worn a lot of different hats doing that, mostly in higher ed. I've done everything from web developer to communications director, and currently am um, independent contractor working mostly in higher ed, um, mostly on like sort of strategy and architecture and those kind of things. I'm also an avid board gamer and D&D DM or Dungeon Master, and so I'll probably use that interchangeably. Other games besides D&D, it might be called a Game Master. Sometimes it has another thematic name, but basically the facilitator of the game. And I also do a lot of music stuff, but that's a very different aesthetic. So I've left it out here for the moment. But that's kind of my other big hobby. All right. So every story has a beginning, and this is the beginning of your facilitation journey. And this is really where the commonality starts. Dungeon Master, Game Master. That's a role of facilitation. If you're doing stakeholder management, other types of meeting facilitation, those kind of things, that's also, well, I just said facilitation, but it's a facilitation role. It's a service role. Okay, so it's different from leading. It's different from being like in charge. You're really there to sort of help everyone else accomplish something. So even if you kind of are in the driver's seat, maybe you are the supervisor or the boss, but you really want to have this collaborative team, you have to go beyond just, driving to get there. So ultimately, what are you trying to do? You're trying to help everyone. You're playing tabletop role-playing games. Your job is to help everyone have fun. If you're trying to, run a stakeholder group, take input from your customers, facilitate a retrospective. You're trying to get something done. And they're all trying to get something done. One recent project that I had to sort of like really think about this is when I came back to my previous employer as a contractor to work on a project that previously had kind of started with me. It was an academic website platform at a university. I had a specific role there as a sort of product owner and manager of the customer board, which meant that like even though previously I could have just said, oh, we're going to do this, this is what we're building, I really had to think about taking a back seat to that and like, let's see what we could learn from the people that are interested in building this thing. So once you sort of realize like what your role is, and could a show of hands, like who here plays role-playing games? Okay, who's been a DM? Okay. Who has had to manage customer groups, stakeholder groups, facilitate meetings that were not for your immediate goals at work? Yeah, okay. So that's really the intersection that we're getting at here. So once you sort of realize like that's your role, you start thinking about structuring your campaign, right? And this goes a lot of what I'm going to say, gonna kind of flow back and forth probably between using like more like workplace terms and D&D terms, but the point is like how it all flows together. So, you ask yourself, is this a planned arc? Do I know kind of like what journey they're going to go on from start to end, or is this open-ended? Similarly, You might have a really specific charge for a specific amount of time, or you might have a committee that just meets forever. What's the tone and tenor? What's the what is the vibe really that is going to be happening in this space? And who are the participants? That's super key. You got to identify your participants. Sometimes you're in charge of finding them. If you're a DM and you don't already have a group, and you might have to go out and search for people. You also need to know sort of in the workplace, especially, who are the outside parties that are involved. Within your game, you might have patrons and key NPCs throughout the or non-player characters throughout the campaign. But in your group at work, you're going to have leaders that don't come to the group, that have to sign off, or maybe you're dealing with a user group, and then you have to take that information back to the customer. So who are the key figures that are outside of the table that you're at today? Once you know that, and you've kind of got your idea, or either your marching orders from your boss, or your idea of how to make this thing work, you start thinking about empowering your heroes. And the first step to that is to know your party. And I'm sure everyone's probably seen alignment chart memes, even if you don't play D&D. So kind of knowing where different people are coming from, how you view sort of their vibe of action, their framework is useful, but this is not the end all be all. And also, if you don't agree with this office alignment chart, don't at me, because I had my wife pick this one out. I think an even more important aspect is in terms of knowing your party, is thinking about group dynamics and the roles people play. So in RPG games, you often have 4 archetypal roles in a party. The tank, that's somebody that gets up close, causes havoc, but also absorbs damage. You have your damage dealers, the people that are really taking care of the bad guys. Your healer, who's going to keep everyone healthy, and support and skill classes, which can do really a jack of all trades, or maybe they're the ones that talk to everyone, or just come in and do sort of specialty things beyond that. And that really carries over to team dynamics in the workplace, to the groups that you might be assembling. If you have some sense of what kind of role, what does each person bring to the table, what's their approach going to be in the meeting, that can really help you think about how you sort of shepherd them along. Next up, beyond that, is what are their goals? Both the goal of the group as a whole, but also the individual goals. And this is a place where I think it's really important, both when setting up a RPG campaign, and when setting up any kind of a deliberative body, an informative group at work. If your role is to facilitate this, seriously consider doing one-on-ones before you get started. I have been especially coming from the university environment, there's so many times where people always want to have everyone in the room. And while that sounds really good, it sounds really inclusive, some people there's all kinds of things that people will not tell you until you get them alone. And sometimes people are worried about a project. Sometimes people already feel like their voice isn't going to be heard. Sometimes people, just are really unsure why they're being asked to contribute at all. And if you sit them down in a group setting first, that will never come out. And they'll either, potentially kind of check out from participating, or, just not be as effective or give you the information you're trying to get. So I do think one-on-ones are really important at the start. Very helpful in a D&D game. You can make sure that you understand each player's motivations and kind of what they want to get out of the game outside of the group context, and also look over their character sheet to make sure they didn't do anything crazy. This is also a good place to start thinking about scheduling, which is not only the bane of D&D groups everywhere, but always a challenge in the workplace, no matter how good your calendaring is. So there's like a growing concept. It's really become a fairly standard thing in recent years with RPG games called Session Zero. And you could think of this as analogous either to a kickoff meeting or even a pre-kickoff meeting. And the important thing here is not so much what you call it or exactly, whether you do it, the first day or day zero, but going through these steps to set expectations with all the participants. Some of this you can do in the one-on-ones as well, but it's a good idea to set everyone down. If you need to have working agreements, code of conduct, any kind of safety, just how people are expected to interact and what they can do if an interaction is tense or goes badly, should be addressed here so that it's up front and people understand. There's a number of safety tools in RPG games now where you can have things like an X card or a certain safe word almost, just to sort of stop the action and let people know hey, I'm not comfortable with this content, or the game needs to go in a different direction. Nobody really knows what everyone else is carrying around, so any time of a group situation, you need some sort of acknowledgement and recourse around boundaries. This is a good place also to bring in accountability, once again, setting expectations, but what are the expectations for the individuals? Do they need to show up every time? Do they have any particular responsibilities within the group? That kind of thing. Once again, going over goals and desires, and then kind of getting to your kickoff. So it's a lot of the same material that you might do in a one-on-one, but it's really important to both have touch base with your individuals and then really cover these things as a group. Then you're almost ready to start doing stuff. So how do you actually start preparing for carrying out whatever you're doing? Well, first of all, you need to have prep for your individual meetings, your individual sessions. And that can be tricky. You need to have not too much, not too little. You're often, especially in the, in both situations, right? Sometimes there's a lot already established and you can just sort of carry that into the next meeting. Maybe there's a lot of reporting, or you need to have a big, lore dump so that you are just sort of doing a lot of exposition basically so that the participants are informed. Other times it's going to be a lot less and you're going to have to go in sort of ready to adapt and try to get the discussion going. So it's important to not spin your wheels over preparing for any sort of meeting, but also to make sure that you're not going in empty-handed. You might maybe even find a framework. So for dungeon mastering, I've taken a lot lately from what's called it's a book called Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. I'll have it in the resources at the end. But also sort of extrapolating for that, just sort of having a framework. The last group that I ran at work was a customer advisory board. And we kind of decided, okay, they need a project update. We want to talk about what's coming down the road and explore how they feel about the, maybe the wireframes that they've seen and the new features that are next up, and get their priorities. And that was something that for the most part we could kind of repeat every time with a little adjustment. And it told us how much to prepare. Um, and then I think with any of these groups and your games, you have to think about balancing exposition and then the sort of discussion or exploration that's going to happen. Second big point on preparation is to remain flexible. You can't have that discussion. You can't get things out of these groups if you're talking the whole time. And also, sometimes you can't just stop talking because then they won't say anything. So you need to kind of just leave room for all of that there. And then the last question is, do you need aids? Do you need materials? Do you need whatever misspelling that is? you know, so this could be in the form of handouts, right? Do you need something in multiple formats because you've got people that interact with things differently? That could be true for your players. That could be very true in the workplace. People have different learning styles. In sort of D&D, there's kind of always back and forth between using maps and miniatures to track combat versus what they call theater of the mind, which is sort of describing it and keeping it loose. And honestly, they both have a place. Just like there's times when you really you want some serious slides to show, some numbers or show maybe wireframes to your group. But other times you may be able to just talk about things. Lastly, for all of these, session logistics is a beast, and if you don't slay it, it will slay you. So that means note taking in particular. Whether you're a dungeon master or you're trying to moderate some group at work, it's really hard to run the show and take notes. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that. There's some people that can do it and I cannot. So get some help there, whether that's recording, if that's an option. Obviously, there's a lot of recording, transcription, summary tools that you can use today that weren't that robust even a few years ago. Assigning someone to take notes, maybe you're lucky enough to have another person from your team who's participating that can kind of shoulder that. Otherwise, maybe a participant can volunteer or it can rotate. In our D&D game, we have one person that takes notes most sessions. The notes are special, and sometimes we go back and read them and they're like, what in the world is this? But someone's writing them down, so it gives us something. Along those lines, recaps, whether at the end of a meeting or the beginning of a next session, leverage those notes and make sure you're keeping people posted on where you are. In my last customer group, I would do a note summary and a summary of the agenda and the recording and send that out to everyone because, usually we had 60, 75% attendance. So it was an opportunity to make sure not only people that couldn't make it got something out of it, but that sort of nothing's lost and that there's a record and people know where it is. Breaks. So D&D sessions are usually pretty long. And so you gotta make sure and take breaks. It's kind of easy in person to some degree. I largely play online with people across several different time zones. So there's a sort of standing agreement that there is a break in the middle of the session. Really anything longer than 2 hours, 3 hours meeting, you need to be having a break for people. 90 minutes, an hour, people can usually sit through whatever you're doing, but let people get up, go to the bathroom, clear their heads for a second. Even just a 5-minute break in a 3-hour, workshop can make a big difference. Getting more towards the segue to the next section, you also have to think about your pacing, meaning what eats up time, how do you keep things moving? You know, has anyone ever had like a sort of a meeting series where there's like a first thing on the agenda that always devolves into like unplanned discussion and then you never get to the end of the agenda? Um, you need, you know, if you want to be effective and get through and make the progress that you expect to make, then you got to think about the pacing. And in terms of progress, you kind of have to leverage all of these aspects, and then stuff we'll talk about in the next section, just to make sure that it feels like you're actually going somewhere. Because nothing feels worse than a meeting series that doesn't go anywhere, and nothing feels worse than a game that doesn't go anywhere. Except maybe the meeting series. Is it the game? You definitely have snacks. Meetings? Sometimes. All right. So now we've kind of like, we've got our prep done. We've got a structure in place. We've thinking about like everything we're going to do um, to make this happen. We're about to sit down at a session. What do we need to do? Number one rule: shut up and listen. So this is literally the only way you can get people talking. Um, the individuals in the group bouncing ideas off each other are going to come up with ideas. They're going to express their needs and like their goals and what they want to do in their terms. That's the stuff, you know, that you want to hear. As a DM, you're listening and then you're grabbing on the little things that they're saying and being like, oh yeah, we could move towards that. Oh, let's use that next time. Or, oh, that'll never happen. And it's the same. It's the same with focus groups, stakeholder groups, anything like that. Like, you need to get them talking, because if everything is in your terms, or they're just responding to you, you're not going to get those that expression. That's the value you're really trying to get out of spending all that time. I mean, working with them. I often in meetings will sort of like look around and be like, okay, how much does everyone make and how fast is the clock moving? And I know it sounds like really base and you know, kind of reductive, but at some point you do have to ask, you know, you have to make sure that like there's a value in what's happening. Once you start listening, you can start like, you'll be so much better at like reacting in the moment. So on some level that's improv, right? Thinking on your feet, coming up with like throwing something back. You know, they come up with an idea, you throw back like, you know, slightly twisted version, or you sort of run with it a bit and get them to keep going with it. So in order to do that, like without completely pre-planning, you need to be aware of like what could come up and kind of like have some ideas about that. But you also don't have to have all the answers. It's actually important to not pretend to have all the answers. And, you know, very often things are going to come up that you're not going to figure out in the course of that meeting. And there's going to be questions that come up with the party that's not going to be resolved in the course of that session. Sometimes you just have to say, well, I guess you don't know that. I guess we don't know that. I guess I don't know that. Let's look into it. We can explore that in the future. All of those kind of things. And then lastly, you can apply the rule of cool, which is just encouraging directions that are exciting or fun, are going to take you where you want to go. So first you're listening, then you're reacting, and then at some point you do have to direct the action a little bit. And so going back to the beginning, I said you definitely don't want to be driving everything. You shouldn't be forcing anyone where they're going. Like otherwise, they're not getting anything out of it. You could just do it. And I mean, has anyone ever been on a rubber stamp committee? Yes. Yeah. I've sat through several of those that were to the point where they were insulting. They would ask for feedback and then say, well, we already built it. And you're just like, then why did you have us here? The analog to that in RPGs is called railroading, and sometime I should actually do like a deep dive on the etymology here, because not only is a railroad on rails, right? And that's part of the imagery, which is like you're on rails and you can't explore, you can't go anywhere else off. But also the railroads were notorious for railroading and like just doing whatever they wanted when they were in their heyday. So I'm always a little curious, like, is it just coincidence that it works so well in both ways? And in RPG games, I mean, especially if you're doing like a pre-written RPG, or you've got some place in your head that you know like they need to go to move the plot forward, you want to be directing them. But if they feel like every time they step off, you just shove them right back immediately, forcefully, that's when it's railroading. And it makes them, the lack of agency, even if you're really trying to shepherd them, just is not fun. So you need, how do you kind of deal with that? Like, do I talk about that more? I think so. Just sort of trailed off. Yeah, so there's a lot of strategies out there to make sure that the people have some leeway and agency and involvement, even if you still have a destination. And some of the other tips that come along dig into that as well. But one that's also important is just to check in with their objectives. I know we talked about it at the beginning, but even within the current context, it's easy when a lot is going on for people to lose sight of why they're doing a particular thing, or why all of a sudden there's a focus in a certain area. And it's a good idea just to ask, what are you after right now? Or what are we trying to do today? This one's a little more dicey, but I was watching a Matthew Colville video recently that really stuck in my head, and it's supposed to be for DMs only and not for players, but I guess we're getting shared secrets here today. So, but I haven't tried this in the workplace, but I think there's a sort of reverse psychology to it that's really smart, which is one way to direct people a little bit without, too much shoving. Challenge them on the good idea. So if sort of people are debating a course of action and there's kind of a really questionable idea and then a pretty good idea, but they are seeing it on an equal term, start challenging the good idea. Don't say that it's a bad idea or that they can't do it, but start asking well, have you thought of all of this? What about, and then that actually, in theory, kind of makes them start thinking about it harder, getting rid of the loose threads and reinforcing it as the course of action. So I haven't tried that one in the workplace, but I plan to. And then, as you're running things will go wrong. You're dealing with other people. You might have 4, 5, 10. Don't do 10 for a D&D game, but you're going to often have 10 people in the conference room. Things will go wrong, and how do you address it? So one is discord and disruption. really the best way to deal with this is up front, like you have those working agreements or a code of conduct, and you can turn back to that, maybe pull someone aside or after a meeting, um, and be like, hey, this is not like within the sort of bounds of what we're supposed to be doing. In a workplace, like if people are not contributing, like sometimes you do have to maybe go back to the group that sent that person and be like, hey, this person's like not helping. Do you have someone else that can participate? It's a hard thing to go through, but if someone is not willing to be like a co-equal partner to the work, you do have to like think about kicking them out. Scheduling, we already mentioned that. So, one thing you can do is hold the time. Like, you can keep things on the calendar. That's really good. But also, you have to just stay realistic about timelines. Don't, leave some room for things to take longer. Participation, it can be really tricky. A lot of times in workplace, sometimes things are compulsory but not mandatory, whatever that's supposed to mean. And so people will kind of check out. That's where, going up to maybe some of those outside parties, the grand lord of the castle, and be like, hey, we really need everyone to come to this, or we're not going to have the representation for everyone, might come into play. Losing the plot. So reinforce the current or original objective. That's one way. Do you have a group charter or a specific deliverable that has to come out of this, and make sure you sort of focus time back to that. And then, related to that is side quests, aka scope creep, which is just more and more things being added or people going down rabbit holes. These things can be really valuable, and they're an important part of both the game and like the workplace experience, because often trying to solve one problem, like you realize that other things are part of the puzzle, but you can go to the point where you're going down that road completely, and people either like lose track of why they're involved with something, or they lose track of why they're involved with something, or whether they're ever going to get to where the main goal was. We had an incident like this recently, with our D&D party, which actually required like having a whole session that was just sort of a check-in outside of the game. And basically, the party, I'll give you the shortest version, the party willfully got teleported by the bad guy to the Undercity with, because you have to have consent for teleportation, and they consented despite it being like a terrible idea. And then, the game kind of became like, well, figure out where you are and how to get out of here, which they enjoyed, but also was like already a little disorienting. And then a side quest came up where they were trying to basically rescue some mechanical men who had oddly started dreaming, even though they don't sleep, from some malevolent force that was making them dream. And in the course of that, trying to tie it back into the main plot, they got sort of ambushed and they almost died. And everyone was very upset because the ambush kind of came out of nowhere, as ambushes do. And that was my justification for myself. They were like, we didn't understand what this was or where it came from. I'm like, that's what a surprise is. Side note, people hate surprises, even, within a game. But basically they were like, oh, we almost died. We don't even need to be on this side quest. Like, what are we doing? How did we get here? And we actually had a nice conversation where we took a step back, kind of like discussed like, okay, well, what is the main plot that you, as you know it right now? Like, how did you get on this side quest? Like, how can I help you? Like, refocus. And we've been trucking along ever since. Okay, so now we'll get into like wrapping things up. And first for the material itself. So this happens at lots of different scales. There's a. I thought I changed that icon. So different scales, right? This could be one session. It could be a plot arc, or one project gets done. It could be the entire like lifespan of a group. For one of the toughest things is what's the definition of done, right? Like, is it when you defeat the dragon? Is it when you grab the loot? Or is it when you're back safely, right? And in there, does something else start happening before you ever get to sit down? That's the way that sort of work can seem sometimes too. So making sure there's like moments where things get that like finality, closure, reflection, even if you're continuing on, is really important. But then also kind of understanding, back to like understanding your players, your participants, their motivations. What's going to make them feel like something happened, like something got done. And that you don't just keep ticking away forever. You have those moments. Within those, you can do rewards. So in, a D&D game, that's often magic items, or other like plot MacGuffins, but also, thanks, praise, having those in-product deliverables, having your project completed, looking at the finished website for the first time. And then retrospectives. So these are super important. So in our D&D game, we usually do stars and wishes at the end. Stars are things that you liked, you want more of, and wishes are things that are like, didn't happen, or you want to be different. That's literally the same. It's literally the same as plus delta, if you've ever done that at the end of a meeting or a workshop. Want to reinforce this, want less of this, or change this. You can also do surveys, questionnaires, other feedback, like just like at these events, there's usually feedback for the event as a whole, sometimes for individual sessions. It's good to gather that stuff. When I took over, so I was originally a player in our game, and I took over as DM. I did a very big survey just to get a sense of where people were, and I did another one like a couple years in. And it's just good to have like that data point reflection. Even if it's not super tangible to the project, it's important for you as someone doing this kind of work to think about like what you could do better or different, or what your strengths are already. Okay, so as a quick recap, do listen, make space for expression. Don't railroad a group that's trying to be collaborative. Do mesh with everyone's needs and motives, and nudge everyone towards the goal. And don't panic when things go sideways. They will, occasionally. And then my last word of advice is that unless you're a vampire, there's no reason to fear stakeholders. So just a few references, and this is far from comprehensive, but The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master book by Michael E. Shea has really influenced like how I prepare. And Jenny D, Matthew Colville, Pointy Hat. These are sort of three of many D&D advice YouTubers, especially if you're thinking of running a game for the first time or just starting to run games. Like Jenny D and Matthew Colville have a ton of advice. Jenny also has tons of advice for players, and Pointy Hat is more like digging into weird aspects of the game and how you can tweak things and yourself and just come up with different ways of doing things. And then I also have some, and also a shout out just to like really great and popular online DMs. If you ever watch like any streaming or anything like that, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Matthew Mercer, Abria Iyengar. It's really, there's sort of a ongoing debate of like whether they're so good that it makes people's expectations too high for their actual home games. But honestly, also, if you do watch them, they're always like, they're doing a lot of listening and a lot of thinking, and it's not just the sort of production value, but they are really good at like tuning into what their players are doing and trying to do, and then reflecting that back out in some way. Some related professional items. These are really loosely, but some books and whatnot I've appreciated over the years that weren't directly tied to this, but kind of play in. Teamwork Foundations was a LinkedIn learning session that me and my whole team watched, and it's very cheesy and a little bit cringy, but also kind of gets to that like, tank, damage dealer, healer. Like it really kind of clicked in my head that like people bring different things to any group that's working together, and you need to like kind of like work with that and or actually assign roles. And then Meeting Design is just a good book about like kind of planning meetings. Agile Retrospectives has lots and lots of activities for facilitation. I absolutely love that. There's another older retrospectives book on O'Reilly that's also good. And then Managing Chaos by Lisa Welchman. That one's a little more like nuts and bolts governance, but it's kind of the impetus for like why you have a lot of these like customer groups, stakeholder groups, committees, that kind of thing. And then it wouldn't be appropriate without a special thanks to these characters. Nyx, Roxkin, Cass, and Iagor are intrepid adventurers who have just finally saved those mechanical men, returned to the surface, and are about to embark on a massive voyage to a whole other continent. So keep them in your thoughts. And that's all I have. If you want to connect, I have cards, or here's my info up here. And then also just want to point out, like, I kind of love that Wizards is pretty generous with fan content use. As long as you're not like directly charging, you can use their imagery, which is pretty cool. All right, so that's it. I got I'm at time, but I don't know if there's any questions or anything else anyone wants to share. Yeah.
Project manager, part of it too. One of the most fascinating there have something side conversation that where people had some trepidation about having but on that.
Yeah, for the recordings, just a comment, liking the idea about one-on-one meetings and how that helps bring out stuff that maybe wouldn't happen or wouldn't be said in a group meeting. All right. Well, thank you all for coming.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.